What's kind of one of the hardest truths that you've had to face as a man?
Neglecting my masculinity, ditching my internal wiring for something completely different.
There's a generation of men, I include myself in this, grown up believing that men are bad in some way.
The phrase toxic masculinity implies that the whole premise of masculinity is toxic in itself.
When you talk about men's problems, some men will reply and be like, no one cares. No one cares how I feel. Have you let anyone actually care?
Dad went into hospital for about 6 months with severe depression. There were lots of times where we questioned, would Dad get better? Would he ever pull through this? That experience has then ignited this fire in my belly, prevent what happened to my dad from happening to other people. It's really hard not to take it to heart and not to take it personally. A change needs to happen. You have to make that change.
Welcome listeners back with another episode. Today I'm speaking to a wonderful man who I followed for a little while, a man who is really bearing his soul, really bearing the experience he's having as this human being, the ups and downs and the difficulties and the trials and tribulations in a way that many men will never do and do not want to do and struggle to do. And I can really resonate with that. Sometimes I get so busy with my own life and work that I forget to tell anyone other than also what's actually going on inside my mind and my life, to be honest. But today we have with us Dan. How are you doing today, Dan?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, David. I'm good. I'm excited to be here and chat all things men. And then what's on the list?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think maybe we'll dive in with the first question then, actually, based on that is, what's kind of one of the hardest truths that you've had to face as a man, as you've kind of grown up? It might be something that's come up recently, but just like a truth about being a man that's suddenly kind of glaring you in the face.
Yeah, I think it's a really positive truth, but I think something that I was doing without realizing was almost neglecting my masculinity, thinking that it was a negative thing to be masculine and trying to exhibit more feminine traits. And there are obviously some amazing feminine traits out there, but almost kind of, ditching my internal wiring for something completely different. And I think it's been a kind of truth. It's like, well, hang on. That's the message that I've been fed. I don't have to do that. There's some really positive, amazing pieces of masculinity where we can sprinkle in some potentially more kind of feminine traits into that and end up with something even better than what we started with. So it's been a really kind of, a hard truth, but a positive truth around what I was doing before and where I kind of want to go now.
And why do you think that is? What do you think the story, the kind of internal, even unconscious story you are holding about kind of masculinity?
Yeah, I think just seeing lots of stuff online, just out there generally, even the phrase, which I don't really like to use, but the phrase toxic masculinity implies that the whole premise of masculinity is toxic in itself. And, I think, just from what I've seen and thinking that by being a man, I'm potentially in the wrong automatically. And then kind of slowly realizing the more and more I've shared on Instagram and kind of started doing this work myself, speaking at organizations, things like that. It's like, hang on a second. There's so many good things here. And there's people really championing men in a really positive way and also connecting with amazing men. I think I kind of, from what I've heard, assumed that there weren't really any good guys out there. I was like, hang on a second. I've got a really good group of guy mates, connect with great guys all the time. I was starting to work with great guys in this men's mental health space. They're everywhere. But I think I thought that they weren't.
Yeah, that's it's a super common thing for us to think, right? And it's interesting. I was speaking to a friend of mine yesterday, and this story will make a little bit of sense in a second. Is he was in a bar and he saw a man with a woman, and she was basically passed out unconscious, and he'd called the staff over. And he had noticed some of the thinking he had started having about that man. So he turned to the female friends with him and he was like, what are you thinking about this man in this moment? And they were all like, what has he done? Has he drugged her? Is he trying to take advantage of her? Has he deliberately got her drunk? All these sorts of things. And he said to his female friends, he goes, that's very interesting because I'm thinking the same thing, but we don't know what's going on over there. But because if because he's a man, we've made all these assumptions about him and his character and who he is. And if if it was a woman with the other woman, we'd all be a lot more like sympathetic towards the woman who's trying to help, instead of suspicious of his intentions and what's going on. And it kind of speaks to what you were saying, is that I feel like there's a generation of men, I include myself in this, right? Grown up believing that men are bad in some way, right? Because of what we have seen, we don't see men being championed in the public eye. Like, we don't see men being championed inside our own families. And I guess the question I have for you is, how do you think that impacted how you saw yourself? How do you, that mirror of like, if there's something bad about men, what does that mean about me as a man?
I think for me, it's really hard not to take it to heart and not to take it personally. Like, it's interesting you asked that, because at the moment I'm on this mission to get my spark back. And you saying that's prompted the thought of, well, I think part of my loss of spark came about, like, the time is kind of aligned really nicely. Like at uni, when I was like, 19, 20, 21, 22, I was really confident, had a really good spark. I was in my groove. And I think kind of from post uni into this kind of mid 20s, late 20s space is when I started hearing all this messaging around men and a negative, view of my gender. It's really hard not to take it to heart, because it's part of my identity. And it's something that I want to be proud of, whilst also really championing the women in my life, because that's really important for me as well. It's an amazing woman in my life, and I'm a massive believer in equality, but I'm not forgetting about, kind of who I am and my gender. So yeah, it's for me, it's almost impossible not to take it to heart, because it's a huge part of who I am.
Yeah, we're men, and it's this, and it's interesting because I've been thinking about this a lot as an idea. Like, how does the negativity around men impact men, but not just men, but boys? Because I've got a son, he's 1 year old. I've got a nephew, he's 5 years old. And, I think I was reading a study a while ago that, boys who grew up around negativity around men, they have lower self-esteem, they have lower confidence, lower attainment, I think I read as well. I need to double check that last one. But it is this, like, how does this impact us as a man? Like this kind of rhetoric. And then I guess the other thought that came to me, I'd love to hear, where you're standing at this, is as I'm imagining, as you've grown up and maybe you've become more empathetic, more emotionally attuned, emotionally aware. And is there any correlation between loss of spark and emotional attunement for you, or emotional awareness?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a risk of, it's a really exciting journey to become more emotionally aware of myself and improve my emotional intelligence. But I do think there's a balance with it, because you can then go so far that you start to overanalyze everything. You overanalyze your behavior or the behavior of others. But sometimes it's just letting go and taking things back to basics and kind of navigating life based on how you feel in that moment and what you want to do in that moment. And if you want to go and have 3 or 4 beers with the boys, go and have 3 or 4 beers with the boys, rather than, oh no, but if I have these 3 or 4 beers, then my sleep's going to be ruined. It's going to really mess up my next day. And I always feel anxious after some beers, and which is obviously very valid. But I do think there's definitely a balance to be found there, where you can overthink your emotions and almost become paralyzed, rather than just living in the moment and enjoying yourself, which, and by living in the moment, enjoying yourself, that really helps with the spark and the confidence and just kind of just being a bit more free.
And yes. And like, there's this interesting kind of spectrum. I'm also kind of thinking as you're speaking, in that you've got, say, like, almost totally in your emotions and feelings, and even really in the reaction of other people's feelings and emotion. Maybe this spectrum isn't so clear cut, listeners. I'm just kind of riffing here. And there's the kind of like disconnection from emotions on the other side here, like really disconnected, not feeling. And it's almost like as men are told that we need to feel more, we can go too far towards the kind of feeling and compassionate side where we're like feeling all our emotions all the time. We're super reactive to what we feel. We're like, oh, to use your example, like, okay, I could go out for a few beers with my friend, but I get super anxious. And then just the thought of having the beers with our friends creates the anxiety now, which makes us uncomfortable about even going to see our friends because we start thinking about, oh God, if I don't have a beer with them and I have some water or sparkling water, what are they going to think of me? We create anxiety around that. And actually we are out of agency. We're not in agency. We're not doing the things we want to do, as you said, like living in the moment. But then over the other side, which is like total emotional suppression and not really feeling, it's like, I'm just getting on it every single day because I don't even really think about or feel what I'm going to feel the next day or how that impacts, because I'm not having that sort of good impulse control plus foresight of the future and the impact. And kind of what I'm hearing you say is like in the middle is this space where we notice what the impact is and what we're feeling, but we're also able to kind of be to some degree kind of more rooted in what our kind of true desire or our true desire of who we want to be is. Have I got that right?
Yeah, it's exactly right. Exactly right. Because when I was at uni, it was too far the other way because I didn't think about these things. I was just like let's crack on. Which was great. And then I think I probably over the years maybe got too far the other way. So I think I'm kind of now on this balancing act, which for me ties in. You talked about men trying to express their emotions more. I think there's also a lot around men need to talk more, men need to talk more, men need to talk more, which is a great message. And again, I think with that, it's also a balance, because if you're asking someone to go from zero and never having expressed their emotions or talk about how they're feeling to talking about it very regularly, it's kind of like going from walking to running a marathon, right? Mm. Whereas what I think we should be aiming for is, well, let's go from couch to 5K. Mm. And that kind of be a happy medium. Like we're kind of not asking too much, we're just asking for a little. If you express your emotion or you share how you're feeling once every 6 months, great. Because if you were never doing that, like, that's such a win. And asking someone to go, okay, well, every day we're gonna journal and we're gonna do it, which is great, but it's asking a lot. So I think with lots of this stuff, there is that balance to be found somewhere in the middle.
Mm. And there's like the gradual ramping up, because when you say couch to 5K, I remember the first time I ran a 10K I was never a runner really. I never enjoyed running really. And I started to run maybe 10 or maybe 8 years ago. And that first 5K feels like, as you're ramping up to it, feels like an incredibly difficult task, right? It feels really painful and really difficult, and almost a level of shame that, you're on Instagram, you're seeing, people like yourself, like running these 5Ks in under 20 minutes. And you're like, oh my God, how is this person doing it? I can barely do 3K in that sort of time. And I guess there's also that same sense of men, there's that shame of not being able to do it, not being able to do it well enough. That, like with people who want to run, can often just stop them from even really starting and getting on the journey.
Yeah. Well, there's that. I think there is a lot of competitive pressure as well in there, which is a really, great trail. The 5K example you gave just now, like my friend has set a 5K PB. So I challenged him to beat it. And if I don't, I've got to take him out for dinner by the end of the year and vice versa, which is a really, that competition is a really great element, I think, or especially in guys who are, can be fiercely competitive. Mm. But then there is that pressure of, well, what if I'm not very good at it? I don't want to be bad at that. I don't want to try that. I don't want to be bad at it. Mm. And I think the same goes for talking about how you're feeling or expressing those emotions. I don't want to be bad at it, But also, I think it's sometimes the danger with this stuff is that you might, in the couch to 5K example, you go for your first ever run off the couch and it might be a pretty unpleasant experience. It might not go very well. And so when I think with guys, that emotional expression piece or sharing how you're feeling, you might do that, but you might get a not so great response from a mate. Not in a malicious way, they just don't know what to say or don't know how to react. And again, going back to the running example, you might then never want to run again because that was quite an unpleasant experience. You put yourself out there, but it didn't work out for you. So I think there's something to be mindful of as well.
Yeah, the capacity of the people around you. And it's a really, at the moment, I'm just reading a manuscript of a book that's coming out soon by someone called George Bell. And in it, he's talking about how as men, we're kind of losing the ability to do tough, especially tough emotional things. Like my belief has always been that a man will do incredibly hard things with his body. He will run marathons. He will do tough mudders. He will do all this sort of like hard shit, right? Pick up big dumbbells, all this stuff. But if you ask him to bear the depth of his own heart and his struggles and his fears and his worries, he would rather do a marathon. Most men would rather run a marathon instead of doing that. And that we are actually losing the capacity to be with our hard emotions because we have so many distractions, you know? I know you talk a lot about mental health, and obviously, you know, we have things like phones that are just like these self-soothing devices, to put it nicely, right? Instead of having to like have that difficult conversation with our partner, we can just like, I'm going to pick up my phone and scroll, or I'm doing this difficult task at work, let me just pick up my phone and scroll. And I wonder how that's impacting men's friendships and the capacity that you mentioned there, where I come with my difficult emotion of like a breakup or some sort of pain, and my friend just, because he hasn't been practicing his emotional kind of resiliency, when I express my pain to him, he's like a deer in the headlights, struggles because maybe he's never touched his own pain, and maybe says nothing, or maybe makes a joke or deflects, and just like how that impacts our friendships with one another as men.
Yeah, I think there's a few things here, David. I think the kind of the phone distraction piece is a massive one, because you're right, they are self-soothing tools. Even me, hold my hands up, navigating a breakup at the moment. If I'm feeling down, oh yeah, but just a little scroll makes me feel better, right? Whereas what I should be doing is, I need to sit with it, because sitting with those emotions will massively help me in the long run, rather than, you know, trying to distract myself. It's very difficult to be bored nowadays, very difficult, because there's always something to distract you. So I think being mindful around, okay, rather trying to avoid those feelings and just sitting with them, even if they're uncomfortable. You know, sadness is good for you in the long run because you're processing things. So don't avoid it. Your body's looking out for you. So just stick with it whilst you do that. It was really important. And yeah, I think, you know, the second point there, I read a study the other day that was analyzing how even when you're chatting with a mate and your phone's in your pocket, how that can distract you from that conversation, and how that reduces the level of trust in that conversation by simply having your device with you in your pocket. You're not even on it, right? Which is just so interesting. And the third thing here is there's a huge education piece, I think, that needs to happen around, guys. Okay, what are the right questions to ask and what are the right responses to give? Because, classic example, I was playing golf the other day with a mate, and I said, I'm not sure if you know, but, you know, so we've broken up. And he just went, bless it. He didn't mean this in a, he was trying to do his best with the skills that he had. And he said, I'm really sorry to hear that, Nate. And then within 10 seconds, it was, right, at the par 4 next hole, what are you taking off the tee? Right? So it was like a quick kind of acknowledgement and then straight into, but in that moment, I actually just wanted to like, just work on it. I wanted just space to just get it out. But bless him, he didn't know how to respond. So it's great that we're asking guys to talk more, but we need to upskill guys in that, you know, basic questions and responses, because it's not that they, you know, deliberately mess up. It's just they don't know how to operate in that space. Yeah.
In that moment, you wanted someone to listen. You wanted someone to ask you a question like, how have you been feeling about that?
Yeah.
How have you been feeling about, how's that been for you? You know? And it's such an interesting conundrum because men don't ask each other those questions. They don't know, they've never been asked that question in that moment, you know? They don't learn they don't learn the questions to ask. They don't learn the list. It's the kind of curious questions that lead to a deeper conversation where, you know, like I said before, it's like, oh, how are you feeling? How did that feel for you? How's it feeling for you? Like, you know, that the empathy step of like, oh my God, man, that must be really difficult, man. That must be really painful for you right now. Like, tell me, man, tell me what's going on for you. Like, how can I help you, starts to take you somewhere. But because men don't do it to each other, because we're not taught to do it to each other from such a young age, we don't learn how to do it. And it's this kind of vicious cycle for men that impacts so many areas of our lives, from, you know, mental health to, you know, my space of like dating and relationships. I see starkly how, you know, that exact problem you're describing, the lack of questions, lack of ability to ask questions, like decimates people's dating life.
Yeah, because asking those deeper questions is connection. That's how, like, if you want to improve the quality of your friendships, your relationships, getting into those deeper conversations it improves the quality of them, in my experience, by a lot. Like, I moved last year, I was living in Vancouver in Canada, so I had to make lots of new friends, which was difficult. And the amount of surface level conversations I had with guys, you know, was a lot. I had a lot of them, and they were nice conversations, but I wanted to get, you know, at some point a little bit deeper. There was one guy though where I was able to do that with, where he came over, we cooked English breakfast, sat on the sofa watching TV, and it turned into a 2-hour therapy session on the sofa. And he's the only one that, now I'm back in the UK, he's the only one that I message pretty much every week. Checks in, oh, how you doing, mate? Vice versa. We call on the phone every now and then. Because in that moment, we formed such a deeper connection than the other people that were really nice, but you know, that connection was just not as strong because we weren't able to trust each other in that way.
And it's fascinating because as you say this, I think to myself, like, we all have this different levels of depth that we can go to as men in conversation, in relationship. And I'm going to quote a TV show that I've been watching a little bit recently. I've been watching Love is Blind recently, and I don't usually watch it, but, you know, for the point of content, I have been. And there was two people, and there was a woman who called Sophie, and she really struggled to open up. And the guy she was with, Kieran, he effortlessly spoke and asked questions. And what was interesting was that you could see he was experiencing some frustration that the relationship wasn't deepening. And she was like, oh, this is as open as I've ever been. And I wonder / know, like, a lot of men must be experiencing this in their relationships where they feel they're opening up, right? They feel they're being, you know, quote unquote, vulnerable and revealing who they are. But maybe the man they're with doesn't feel that, right? And I hear from a lot of men where they're like, oh, actually, I say a lot of men, I'm going to talk about myself here. I too notice what you notice. Most men struggle to have a decent conversation that's like deeper and more meaningful. And I went traveling for 2 years, 8 years ago. So I came back and most of my friends were in relationships. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go and do stuff on my own. I've been traveling for 2 years. I'm used to going out and being my own. And I found meeting men to be incredibly difficult. And what I often found is that I'd meet someone, I'd be like, oh, that was a really interesting conversation. You'd be like, hey man, let's like sort of details, let's hang out sometime. And then you'd never hear anything back from him. And I always wondered whether, like, oh, I wonder what his experience of our conversation was. Did he experience our conversation as like deep and interesting? Or did he experience our conversation as uncomfortable and like feeling out of his depth? Or did he experience the conversation as a bit shallow, right? And not really going anywhere? And then there's another experience of what a lot of men experience, and what, you know, a lot of men talk to me about is they meet other men and the conversation is so shallow, but no one knows how to take it deeper into anything more meaningful, more interesting.
Yeah. I think it is that, it's that skills gap, that empathy skills gap that exists. And I think, but what I will say is I do think there's a really beautiful part of male friendships that are really important. It's important that we keep, and that's that someone was saying to me the other day how she was observing a group of her boyfriend and his group of mates, and they were just playing and they're just being so silly, and I think there was a water park and it was just hilarious and just guys being guys. And that's one thing that I love about male friendships is sometimes there's lots of banter, it can be very silly, competitive, fun. And so it's really important that we keep that, but we need to sprinkle on this extra layer of those deeper questions. I know, not just, are you right, mate? You know what? How are you really feeling about the breakup? Like, I'm here to listen if you need me to. Something as simple as that can just massively deepen that connection. So, when you were chatting with that guy, how is this connection? I think for me, the ultimate, when I try and connect with them, the ultimate middle ground is there's some jokes in there. It's a little bit lighthearted, but there'll also be a sprinkling of something a bit deeper to get things going. That's, from my perspective, that's what I love. That's the sweet spot for me.
Yeah, like a range.
Yeah.
Like this embodied range, like as you're saying it there, so many of us men can be stuck in this, when we talk emotionally, I speak to guys, they're like, I just feel okay and fine most of the time. I'm like, oh yeah, so you don't have the range to get into like deep sadness, incredible joy. And actually that's what I hear you're saying there. I'm hearing is like, you want your friendships to embody a range of emotional experience that's available to both people.
Yeah, but I even me, like, again, I hold my hands up. I find it difficult to label specific emotions that I'm feeling. Like that kind of, again, that emotional education. Well, yeah, okay, I'm happy or sad. Well, that very basic ways of labeling your emotions. But there's so many on that. Like, you can list all the emotions down. I really want to get better at it. No, I feel, this specific emotion today. Is it dread? Is it fear? How much do I feel anxious? What specifically am I feeling, rather than, oh yeah, I feel good. Yeah, not so good. It's very broad. So therefore, when it's very broad, it's very hard to then kind of diagnose it and go into, why am I feeling like that? Again, that classic masculine logic solution mode. But why am I feeling like this? Okay, I'll sit with it for a bit. Is there anything I can do to try and improve that feeling, or is something I need to sit with? But that more effective labeling will definitely make things easier to then navigate that emotion. So that's something that I need to get better at, is specifically, what am I feeling?
Yeah. Yes, really important. It's a really valuable skill. I think as men, we don't learn. One of the reasons I think we don't learn is we get cut off with logic. We get disconnected from the body, where the vessel of actual feeling. So we just try and think our feelings, we try and overthink. And I wrote something just before we jumped on, is so many men I speak to, they're like, oh, I'm overthinking all the time. I'm overthinking. And I always when I work with someone, I always give them basically the same practice to do is, I ask them just to take 10 minutes and I give them a kind of track to listen to, where they breathe and they allow themselves to feel the feelings that are underneath the thinking. Because our habitual habit of overthinking is a mechanism to avoid having to feel what's underneath. Because if I think about it, I can almost give myself the illusion of doing some work around my feelings. But in fact, it's just a way that we avoid feeling. And then that's why we get so stuck in the head, because the feeling persists and the thinking feels like it might just solve the problem. Like it is a Rubik's Cube that can be solved by thinking, when actually it's just a process of feeling what's there and allowing it to be there, allow it to kind of dissipate and dissolve and integrate. And sometimes a really more beautiful truth kind of comes through afterwards.
You're so spot on there, David. And that's a huge realization I've had, I think, in the last 6 months, because I normally do everything up here. Like, I've always been really proud, proud of my brain and what it can do. But I connected with a therapist, I think 4 or 5 months ago. She was joking, but she was like, Dan, your brain is like a huge muscle, but your heart and your gut are like chicken legs. And I was like, at first a bit like, oh, taken aback. It's true. Because she was like, well, what's your gut saying? I was like, I don't know. I was like, what's your heart saying? I don't know. Like, I was trying to navigate this, this important decision in a relationship perspective. And all my mates, people were like, what's your gut saying? I was like, I don't know. Because I haven't trained that muscle to use my gut or what my heart's saying. but I'm very good with what my brain is saying. So it's always thinking, always like thinking to get out of something, always like, okay, logic mode, these are the steps that I need to take. What's the information? Like I was trying to buy a suit and I spent about 6 hours trying to buy a suit because I was like, what's the price? Like I was collecting all this data. And in some ways to me that works. Like I like to collect a lot of data before making a decision. But there's something really important about, yeah, but what's your gut saying? What's your heart saying? And someone gave me a really cool exercise of the day. It was like, what do you think? What do you feel? And what do you know? So like, what do you feel is in your heart, and then what do you know is in your gut? And I was like, that's a really helpful way, and helped me anyway to kind of digest it. Be like, okay, thinking about it, I've got a bit of a brain block. It's not quite coming. So what do I feel about it, and what do I know deep down about the situation? To start to train up those muscles, because at the moment they're quite weak.
Yeah. Yeah. How's it going? How is the training going for you?
It's slow, but it's getting there, and it's also really rewarding because when I'm in a bit of a spin up top, I can pull on other tools rather than just keep on going around in my head, because it's tiring overthinking all the time. It's exhausting. Whereas now I can be like, okay, I'm not quite getting anywhere in my brain. What's my gut saying? But my gut feels a bit funny about this. Probably trying to give me a sign that something's not quite right. So it's really cool when I'm like, oh wait, I just did that, and that was actually really helpful. So it's like I'm slowly rewiring it, but it's going to take a lot of time because for 28 years I've always just used up here.
Yeah. The kind of real like masculine message that we learn from a young age, isn't it? It's just like our brain is the most superior organ that we have. You know, it goes back as far as, you know, philosophers who, I think it's Kant, is it, that turned around and said, you know, I think, therefore I am, which just in that statement, it just basically says, I feel, therefore I am, right? Or I know, therefore I am. I think, therefore I am. Then the I am, then everything else just disappears and becomes like meaningless. But actually, it's the part of our being that creates so much meaning and kind of purpose for us.
Yeah, and I do think like bringing in that gut and that those feelings is really important. But also, I do think that ability, you know, especially for men, that logic, problem solving, kind of calm in a crisis, kind of behavior is really amazing as well. I think that's what my ex-girlfriend used to call it, the airport boyfriend modes, right? You enter an airport and you're like, right, we're in here. Okay, then we'll be here this time. We're going to check. It's that like very structured logic problem solving approach, which I don't think we should lose because that's really cool. But it's just, again, sprinkling in more of that, more of that feelings-based approach as well.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting to say that because I was listening to a video on YouTube recently. It was talking about emotional suppression and emotional load that men take on. And the example you give there of the airport is like, it's a bit like I was talking about the range before, like the ability to suppress our emotions for a period of time is a very useful and important thing for us to do. I just want the listeners to know that, because I think sometimes in the circles of masculinity and men's work, we talk about it's like, we should be expressing how we feel all the time. No, there's nuance, there's a range. Like the ability to say in the airport, because I also agree, airports are, you know, no one likes being in the airport. They're inherently stressful places. Like I've got an aura ring, and every time I step into an airport, my stress levels just hit top. You know, I can never really get down until I've been out of a plane for like 2-3 hours. But the ability to go, I'm just going to park all of these feelings for a little bit and move through the task at hand and get done what needs to be done is actually a really vital human skill, man skill, because, you know, we can't always be analyzing our feelings and emotions. Sometimes we just need to go, I need to get on with this thing. But what I'm really getting this conversation, and I often talk about, is like range. It's like having the tools for the right moment, like having the tools in our toolbox to be like, oh, this is a moment where I'm going to like speak about how I feel because, you know, it's a good space to do so. Or it's like, I need to do so. Or this is a moment where I just need to like get my child through Tesco's without them screaming and without me losing my shit. And it's just knowing when to deploy these tools.
Exactly. It's I love the analogy of a toolbox. It's like if I'm fixing my bike or a car or whatever, you've got the toolbox and there might be an adjustable spanner in there. It's like, okay, for this particular situation, I need to use the adjustable spanner. But then the next day or the next situation, it might be like, no, I really need the Allen keys this time. So, but having a toolbox with only an adjustable spanner in, it's great when you need to use the adjustable spanner. But if the toolbox is empty and the other things, in some situations, you're going to find it really difficult because, trying to change the gear cable on a bike with an adjustable spanner is not the right tool. It's like you need an Allen key. So I'd love that analogy of the toolbox where it's like men have got some great things in their toolbox, but we can make that toolbox even better.
Yeah. I want to change tack slightly, change direction slightly. And I know the reason you got into talking about mental health so publicly and so openly is something incredibly close to home, to do with your father. And I'd love to hear a little bit of that story from you and dive into that.
Yeah, of course. So over 5 years ago now, Dad went into hospital for about 6 months with severe depression. And he is fortunately all good now. I kind of call him Steve. It's called Steve, so I call him Steve version 2.0 because it's kind of grown him in some ways and changed his perspective on a lot of things. So it's kind of this new man, which is really cool. But yeah, it was a really difficult phase where there were lots of times where we questioned, would Dad get better? Would he ever pull through this intense kind of deep hole that he found himself in? It was proving very, very difficult to get out of that hole. So it was a really difficult time, but that experience has then ignited this fire in my belly to go on this mission to essentially prevent what happened to my dad from happening to other people. Because I truly believe that what happened to Dad could have been prevented. And with all of this, especially depression and that kind of area of mental health, is that if we can catch them early when they're struggling, it's very easy to pull someone out of a shallow hole. It's quite difficult to pull someone out of a very, very deep hole. So the more we can catch people at that earlier stage, just like with heart disease, everyone does exercise to keep themselves fit and healthy and prevent the risk of something like heart disease, right? Preventing that is so much better than treating it. And for me, it's exactly the same with our mental health. Preventing us from getting to that incredibly low spot is what it's all about.
And what triggered your dad's depression?
Yeah, it's kind of like when it happened, I think the classic masculine airport mode. I just kind of buried it. I didn't really appreciate the magnitude of what was happening or how serious it was. I was doing my final year exams at uni, so I just kind of went back to uni. I was like, I was going to get my head down, do this. Got upset a few times about it, but I was like, well, here's what it is. Let's crack on. I didn't really understand it. Before that happened, the term mental health or depression, it wasn't really in my vocabulary. It's not something I really thought about. And then last September, I can't remember how it came up in conversation, literally around the table, I said to Dad, why do you think you became severely depressed? Because as I started to share the story on social media and on kind of all those things, it kind of, I was like, I don't really know much about this at all. I don't really know what happened. Dad's never really spoken about it, but it's just a huge deal. So I want to speak about it. And so Dad gave us there was some classic things in there that you would expect, like, poor lifestyle, so lack of exercise, maybe not the best diet. There's lots of stress at work. But there were a few themes that stood out to me that I found really interesting that I hadn't really thought of before. First one being purpose. So thoughts of, why am I needed? Why am I here? Because Dad didn't get any purpose from a job he'd been in for about 30 years. It was a good job, but it didn't get him up in the morning. And it also coincided with a time where he felt like my sister and I kind of fled the nest, and his purpose of a dad then diminished a lot. So kind of started to sow the seed of, well, what am I needed for? And when those thoughts start to come in, which I think are more common than people realize, it can be quite scary, but also quite dangerous, because not having that reason for being can take us down a slippery slope. And the second one was a lack of connection. So, and again, lack of connection, but also that lack of education on what to say. His mates after happened, like, we didn't know what to do, didn't know what to say. And Dad was like, well, all you needed to do was just come over and just tell me about your day. Just tell me what you got up to today. Simple as that. I think, we think we need to have a solution, but we don't need to have a solution. We just need to listen, or just express normal conversations or normal behavior. So I found that really interesting, lack of purpose and lack of connection, which is exactly what I talk about when I go into companies and share that story and what we learned from it. How can we build more purpose and connection?
Wow, it's really powerful. And it's I guess it's just like, I'm going to start with, the kids leaving and no longer needing us, like this dad archetype of like, I'm a dad, I look after my kids, I take them to places, I feed them, I clothe them, all that. And that slowly, diminishes with age, because, once we're in our 20s, we don't need our parents so much. And you're off to university, and that almost steals that part of its purpose away from it. It dissolves away, right? The last remnants. And I'm the opposite end of fatherhood. And, I've just picked up this purpose of being a dad. I can see how purposeful it is. But the purpose piece is so prevalent, I think, for men. And it was something you said, sorry, I want to dive into first, is what am I needed for? And I've been like listening and diving into content and books and all sorts. It's just like, and as men, there's this, I don't want to call it inherent, because I think it's maybe quite learned as well. And I don't think it's just unique to men. I think women also feel this, but it's easier in society for women to feel needed, not always in the most positive ways, but for men to feel needed in their communities or by the people that are around us. It's like such an important part to our psyche and to our willingness to kind of keep going and keep moving through life.
Yeah, I can completely agree. And when you couple that with all of the kind of negative views on masculinity that have cropped up in recent years, to say, well, hang on, I'm not great for my identity and who I am, and I don't know what I'm needed for, because I'm not. I feel like I'm not good at anything, but I'm not wanted here, which is quite daunting. And I think I'm not a scientist or anything like that, but we're designed to be around people. Like we're kind of in that, thousands of years ago, in that kind of tribal setting where guys had a very clear purpose, probably to go and hunt and bring back food, and it was very defined. Even 40, 50 years ago, the roles were very defined. Maybe they were not correct roles, because we unfortunately had a lot of inequality, as still do in lots of ways. But it was very much the man's a breadwinner, the man goes to work, and women will stay at home and do the cleaning and raise the kids and things like that, which I'm not saying I agree with that view, but the roles were very defined. And now we're in this space where women are becoming more empowered, which is amazing, and long may that continue, because lots of work still needs to be done in that space. But then if you couple that with this feeling of, for me as a 28-year-old guy, it's like, well, the inequality that we had before, the patriarchy, like, I didn't create that, and I'm actively trying to rebalance things in my day-to-day life. But where does that leave me? What's my role now? Because even in my past relationship, 50-50 breadwinners, 50-50 earners. So is my role am I 50% of the, yeah, great. Is that my role? Should it be 20%? As women have become more empowered, which is brilliant, is throwing up all these questions, I think, around what are the roles now? which I think is really exciting in lots of ways, because it was a clean slate. It's like, okay, well, what are the roles?
Yeah, it's very much what I see. You know, you've had this women's revolution that has expanded the role of what women can take up in society and in their own lives. And what we've seen as from men is we haven't had that. And I can see why I can understand why some men would see that the expansion of kind of womanhood, should we call it, has taken over some of manhood, right? I can understand how you could see that from that perspective. Because you're like, okay, women used to do the nurturing, you know, the very feminine things, the house, like you said, the home, the children. Man used to work clear lines. You know, a lot of men love clear lines and rules. It's a certain level of simplicity. And now we live in a world which is far more complex and nuanced in that, you know, my partner works, he always has work and she will always work. We're 50-50. And it's like, well, what am I needed for if my partner doesn't need me financially? If my partner doesn't need me sexually, right? If we start getting into things like sex toys and so forth, what if my kids don't really need me because their mother can do everything for them? What does, you know, my friends don't need me because I hardly see them. You know, suddenly we're in this kind of hole, which I think a lot of men are existing in, where they don't feel like anyone in the world really needs them or appreciates them as well. So I think appreciation is a really kind of respect and appreciation are really important. And then you can just be left in this kind of soup of, oh, what's the point, right? Or you kind of swing the other way, which I think a lot of men do, is go into anger. It's like, fuck the world. It's all their fault, women, minorities, whoever you want to point your finger at. We need to stop them. And we join one of these, not organizations, but ideologies, we call them, that are like, it's all their fault, because at least that's empowering, right? At least it gives you some purpose and meaning and direction. It might not be the right way to go, but it does give some agency to some degree, but maybe not in the ways that are really useful.
Yeah, exactly. And what's really interesting is that it's quite a sad study, but the two words that guys most commonly leave on their suicide notes are useless and worthless. Right. So common feelings when you are feeling very, very low and depressed. But I think, as you said, in this space where the roles of a man are not clearly defined, it's a lot easier to get to that conclusion. It's like, well, I'm worthless, I'm useless. What am I needed here for? Right. So that's, you know, one really important part of that. And the other part is, a brilliant author called Richard Reeves has this phrase where it's not a zero-sum game. And I love that phrase, because you're right. It's really scary that there's lots of unpleasant organizations popping up. It's like, well, it's like men versus women. Men, like, it's their fault that this is happening. It's not their fault. In my eyes, it's not their fault. And as a great example, it's not a zero-sum game, right? Paternity leave. We're trying to increase the length of male paternity leave, right? I've seen a few things on LinkedIn at the moment. It seems like a trending topic. Great example, right? More time for the dad with his kid. Easier for the wife or girlfriend or partner, whatever, to go back to work a bit earlier, to advance their career, or feel like they're not solely responsible for bringing up that child in that time. Like, what a cool place to be in. What a cool example where it benefits everyone when we reach a more equal state. It doesn't have to be this like, oh, it's us first. It's like, it's not. It's really not. Like, we need to work together on this.
Yeah. No, really good points there. And I touched on the last one you said there, the zero-sum game. I love Richard Reeves' book, of Boys and Men. Listeners, if you haven't read that book, you can just go and read it. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not a binary thing. And I think in fear, when our brain is afraid, our brain thinks in binary terms, or maybe even we are activated, because I think even when we're insecure, we think in these very binary terms of like, oh, good, bad, right, wrong. yes, no, we just resort to that. It's like, it's not a zero-sum game, as you said. It's like, if women advance themselves, it also gives space to men to do other things, like, like rest more, play with your kids more, find meaning and purpose through things that are not just work, right? Because I think you talked about the word worthless and useless in people's suicide notes. And so much of our worth as men is tied to finance and job, right? We see our worth as men through the lens of what can we provide, and not provide in a more kind of wider term, but it's very much in terms of provider financially. What do I do that I can provide money to people? And if I can't do that, then I become worthless. And if I'm useless and worthless, that becomes a really difficult kind of triangle to be in for us. Yeah, and one of the questions I had actually from before, because I feel like I'm really digging into you, but this is what we're here for. Actually, the question I have actually is, it's linked back to your father again, I guess, is when, your father goes into hospital for 6 months, you said you're asking your dad these questions because you're starting to kind of understand the gravitas, the weight of it. How did that impact how you started to look at yourself and how you had been operating kind of as a man, and how that way of operating was impacting you and your connectivity in your life?
Yeah, I think the two main things here are that it made me more aware of bottling things up and how that can come back to bite you. So, I think I do wonder with Dad whether the other things that were stored in him that he never really took the time to process or speak about. For example, my dad's dad, my grandpops died when he was 60. He's quite young, and I spoke to Dad about this the other day. He's like, I just went into. I was like, how did you grieve it? Kind of, and he was like, well, I had to look after you and your sister, and I had to go back to work, and then had to sort again that like logic problem solving mode, which is important in that moment, I guess, but also it's like recognizing that to also make sure that you take the time to sit with these things. And the second thing for me is it's made me panic. And so it used to make me panic when I started to feel down or low, be like, is the same thing happening to me? Because I've seen this happen to my dad, someone who you think it wouldn't happen to, or you perceive them as invincible. And then I realized that I was like, oh, hang on a second, if I'm down for one day, I'd start to get quite worried about it. But when you take a step back, that's very normal, and that's okay. Like 2 or 3 days, I'm not feeling too great. That's all right. Might be a few weeks. That's okay. Obviously, when it expands into that's when it's something that's more serious. But if that's been a big kind of learning point for me, is that I was panicking about it. It's like, it's okay, Dan. You don't need to panic. Just because that's happened doesn't mean it's going to happen to you. You've got so many tools that your dad didn't have because he wasn't trained in that way. It was a very different time. And now I'm in this space where those masculine principles are less rigid, and I've got more space to maneuver in terms of expressing emotions and chatting to mates. And because of the work I do, I'm connected with awesome guys that I can call and be like, I'm really struggling. And I've learned from Dad's experience, I've got all of that, which is awesome. So I can now approach things in a more preventative way. Like, I got made redundant a few months ago. Okay, has some of my purpose gone? How can I replace that? Right? It's like straight in there, because I know what's going to happen if I don't. Or I'm struggling today. Okay, I'm going to have this day to myself, but tomorrow I want to connect with a mate and just ask if he can listen to me for a little bit, because I know what I need to do. It's not foolproof, but because of what we learned through Dad's experience and what I'm learning throughout this journey that I'm on to achieve this mission, is really helpful for me for my own mental health.
Yeah, the agency I really hear is like sort of self-responsibility. Yeah,
well, no one's come to save you. I think that's a big realization I've had recently. Is obviously you must lean on your network, But ultimately, if a change needs to happen, you have to make that change.
Yeah. Yeah. It's for us to get, no one's going to ask us the perfect question to open up, or because I see a lot online when you talk about men's problems, some men will reply and be like, no one cares. No one cares how I am. No one cares how I feel. And I always kind of retort to that, like, have you let anyone actually care? Have you let anybody care? Because so many men come to me for work and they are struggling, but because they've kept on such a strong mask of being fine, no one has the opportunity to care. Or if someone does try to pry and ask questions, they are, well, not forceful, but they push people away because they have this existing belief of that no one cares. We are incredibly powerful creators, I say, as human beings, in that if we believe something to be true, we will shape our whole life and identity around that truth. As men, for instance, an example is like, we'll be like, no one cares about how men feel. And we will look for all the evidence we have of like, we're talking to someone and we mention how we feel and we're like, oh no, they ignored me. They didn't care about my emotions. You see, that's true. And we'll ignore all of the evidence of that people do care about us. So I often think it's like, we have to take a level of agency, not just over our own action, but to a certain degree over our own thinking and our beliefs that we kind of project out into the world.
Yeah, we definitely do, which is easier said than done, because when you've got a thought that's been wired in there for decades, what's really cool is that you can rewire that thought, but it takes it's not easy. There's kind of a great analogy when we're like skiing and you kind of have the ski grooves down the mountain. And if you've got one train of thought, those grooves are going to be really deep that you've done for like year after year after year. And so then you take a different route down the mountain and you have to take that different route so many times to make it deeper and stop using the old route, which is possible. It's definitely possible. Some really cool stuff around neuroplasticity, like how your brain can literally rewire itself. But it's not like, again, full transparency for me right now, I'm trying to improve my mindset on certain things. And I'm trying to catch myself when I go into the old ski groove. I'm like, okay, that's the old, how can I go down a different route? And like over time, it will work. But and the result of that is amazing. Like you get there and go, oh my God, yes, this is so much better now. But it takes time to get there. But we can all do it with the right knowledge, the right tools. Even if it was someone working with like yourself, David, if getting some coaching or whatever it might be. I've got a coach at the moment. It's really helpful. But sometimes you need an external perspective to just be like, hang on a second now. You did that. You need that someone looking from an outside lens.
Yeah. And it's like you said, it takes time and there's an effort, right? Because what I'm hearing is I'm just hearing from you as a level of diligence of like, okay, I want this change in my life. And I know the steps and stuff I need to do to kind of get there. I need to make an effort. I need to be conscientious and consistent. And I'm going to do that work. And that's the thing, isn't it? It takes the change of the mind takes a long time. And it's easier not to do it. It's easier to just fall back into our same grooves of the neural pathways that have been trodden for 10, 15, 20, 30. I work with men who are in their 50s, right? And they've been doing the same thing for, 45 years. It can be done. It's just, it actually takes a lot of effort. And I guess I wonder, we live in a world where, I sound like an old man, we live in a world, but this is how things have shifted and it keeps shifting. Doing hard things feels too hard for most people. Like, people talk about, I'm always seeing Alex Hormozi just like all over my Instagram. No matter what I do, I don't follow him. I don't really listen to him. Not that I dislike him or anything. I've listened to a few times, but he's all about doing the hard stuff. And so many people want what he has, this $1 billion business, $1 million, this, da, 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 da. But the day-to-day work that you've kind of described there, and maybe I'm getting to be on my bonnet because I see this with a lot of people I speak to, the day-to-day work of catching the thoughts, catching the beliefs and going, no, I'm going to choose something different. People don't really seem to actually want to do. They want to go and find some instant fix.
Yeah, because it's the easy route, right? It's just like, yeah, I mean, the challenge I'd have back that though for anybody listening is that we're quite good at sticking to the gym to get shredded, right? In most of the time, okay, it's very clear. Like I need to go 3 or 4 times a week. I need to improve my diet, and because I want to improve my fitness. I want a certain physique. It's the same approach for our thoughts, right? So if we can do it in the gym, then why can't we do it in the gym up here as well? It's kind of how I like to think about it. It's like, start of this year, I really struggled to do pull-ups in the outdoor gym. Now I can do 4 sets of 10 pull-ups, right? Really happy with that because I consistently showed up and have done it. So I'm like, well, if I can do that, then surely I can do exactly the same for the thoughts I'm having. But it's very tempting to not go to the outdoor gym, to not analyze, to try and fix those thoughts and go back to what you know. It's very easy to go on Instagram and get a quick fix of dopamine or whatever you're looking for because it's easy, it's very accessible, and it comes really quickly. That good feeling comes instantly. Whereas gymming or trying to rewire your thoughts takes longer to get to that feeling. But when you get there, that feeling will last so much longer. Rather than like it's like oh yeah, this is sustaining me for much longer than just getting that quick fix.
Yeah. And you mentioned like coaching and therapy as well, and this is something that inherently men, part of the kind of traditional masculine idea is that we don't seek help, we don't need help. What would these things be? Like, I'm going to go to therapy and just sit and talk about my problems, how that's going to solve my problems. What benefit have you seen for yourself through kind of therapy and coaching?
A lot of benefits. I mean, I think what I've done, but on the coaching side, like this time last year, I was feeling really frustrated because I was like, I have so much energy to give, but I don't know where to give it. So I had 12 weeks with a business/life coach, and we got down to this. I can articulate to you very clearly today my mission because I did that work. Right before that, I've struggled with it. I was like, I don't know. I'm in corporate. I'm in this job. It's fine, but I can do more than this, but I don't know what to do. Don't know what I want to do. So that was really helpful for me. Like it's unlocked so many doors that I would probably be speaking to you right now if I hadn't done that coaching. Right. So that's a really example of like really positive steps forward. For therapy, I found it really helpful from a relationship perspective. So I'm trying, literally, I need to go back at the moment, but perfect example is my first relationship, I got cheated on. And then in my second relationship, obviously those fears and thoughts start to come back that the same is going to happen again. So I was like, right, I need to unpack that. And not just unpacking it, but like, well, how can I move forward from this? I think there's a thought that therapy is only like backwards facing, like you have to dive into all your trauma from when you were like 4 and how someone like didn't like give you a hug when you did it. Like it's not, from my experience, it's not like that. There is obviously an element of, okay, well, this is my history, this is my past, but there's such a forward thinking element to it as well. And for me as a guy, it's really attractive because it's that logic, problem solving, forward focused behavior. That is a really important part of therapy. So understanding why things are the way they are, but then what action can we take? Because it's all well and good doing the understanding bit, but got to move forward as well and take that action. So yeah, for me, relationships is a big one that I use therapy for. And I think lots of, I run a men's community and we have different group chats, and the relationships one is the one that always has the most messages in it. interesting in itself. So yeah, I'm a perfect example of that because that's what I mostly use therapy for.
No, it's a beautiful use, and it's yes. I had a therapist for 3 years, and a lot of what I wanted to unpack was how is the past negative? How is things from the past that I don't know about negatively impacting my present and my future? That was a big. I'd had coaching before, and I wasn't qualified as a coach yet. But I was really fascinated by that. And as someone who is trained as a coach and trained to observe other people and see the patterns, having someone else help me see my patterns was so vital to me. And in many ways, I don't think I'd be, in my relationship with my partner now for 6 years, had a little boy without having a therapist who I could bounce what's going on, and someone who'd actually ask me questions that would make me feel a bit fucking uncomfortable sometimes and actually make me feel quite gaslit, which I think all therapists should gaslight you. It's their job. It's their job to make you question your reality, because our reality is built up of our thoughts and our ideas about who we are. Someone needs to go, well, really, is that what happened? Is that actually? Because so many times I've started to see myself and noticed how the facts of what happened and my thoughts and my emotions about what happened are different things, and I forget the facts, and all I remember is the thoughts and the feelings about what happened. And then I tell people about what happened, which is the version of my thoughts and feelings. And then I revisited past events, and I'm like, holy shit, I'm a fucking liar. I'm lying to people when they ask me about this event, how it happened, because I'm removing all these facts because I want them to know the emotional story that often has a payoff for me about what happened. And it's so vital to have persons, and friends aren't trained to do this. That's why therapy is so vital, to reflect back to you and make you think and start to and see how you're recreating these same things in the future, like the example you gave there with, past cheating, and then the feelings that come up in the moment in a current relationship, and how we then project that onto our partner and start to see things that may not be happening. And then we start reacting to those things that we think we see happening, and how that then impacts the relationship. It's a really it can be very intense for people, and they can really believe what they think is happening is the cast iron truth.
Yeah. It can question your whole reality. It is simply someone asking you the right questions to help you think in a different way. Because you're right, you build up those perceptions or views of what happened when it's but then when someone asks you the right questions, it's yeah, but actually maybe, when you start to look at the facts rather than the thoughts and feelings. And I think that's what's things even like Google or ChatGPT, it's very easy to convince yourself that you've got a certain thought pattern or a certain problem because they're wired to kind of support what you're putting in there. Whereas, so they're quite dangerous in that sense. Whereas a trained therapist will be able to challenge you, simple example, I'm rubbish at football, right? Oh yeah, but it's and I play for this team, and so okay, so how many goals have you scored this season? 20, right? Okay, and have you started every game? Yeah. Right. Okay. So, you get where I'm going with it, is that you build up this thoughts or this especially negative self-talk, whatever it might be, and then that is challenged, to allow you to then move forward.
Yeah. Tell me more about the community you started, Shoulder to Shoulder. What prompted you to create your co-found a men's community?
Yeah, so I run it with my friend Tom Stroud, and it's funny how the world works, but I was actually watching Love is Blind, and Tom was on Love is Blind, and this was a while ago. He shared a video about masculinity. I shared it on Instagram story. He saw it. We got chatting in the DMs. And we met for a coffee. Anyway, from then on, it ballooned a bit. Let's start this community. From my side, I created it. I wanted to create it because, like I said earlier on in this podcast, I've been told to talk for a long time, but it's a two-way street because you need someone to listen. So how can I and Tom and I create this space? I think for Tom, it was more around advice on relationships and dating, because that's more his niche and his specialty. For me, it's more that men's mental health piece. How can we provide these spaces for men to connect? Simple as that, to connect and grow together. And then not, we do walks and coffees, we do sauna and cold ups, things like that. It's never okay, you're here, you need to talk about your feelings. It's not positioned in that way at all. It's like, you're here to connect, to meet people, to have a good time. If you want to chat about something, by all means, please do so. But you don't have to. There's no pressure in that space. It's simply providing the right environment for it. A safe environment with good guys doing fun things on a regular basis. It's as simple as that.
And it's so important, you bring people together in person, right? Because so many of us have these online communities where, Reddit technically is an online community, but we never actually have that experience of being in person with someone, really listening to the words leaving their mouth, the facial expressions, the feelings, the way they shift in the body, like that vital kind of embodied community and feeling that we get when we're with another man, talking to him face to face.
Yeah, that face to face, it's, the online connection is okay, but that face to face connection it's poles apart. It's so different. And you can even, if a guy on one of his walks or coffees opens up to you and they're really struggling, like, you can physically like put your hand on his shoulder or give him a hug or something. What a cool moment. And I always like, I kind of, maybe I've coined this phrase myself, but it was when we, at the Banquet Brothers event that we went to, but it was like, you can go to somewhere, it's a complete stranger, or there might be an acquaintance or maybe a loose friend. But in that moment, you can by being vulnerable with each other or connecting on that deeper level, you can turn an acquaintance or a friend into a brother. And I think that's so powerful, because even like messages on Instagram, it's like, hey brother, I love it. It's like, yeah, we're all brothers, we're all in this together. So look out for each other and support each other, right? We're in that tribe.
And it's the very thing that as men, we're lacking and missing, when we talked about feeling needed and wanted, like that community. And I see the same thing in the community that I run, is how transformational it can be to be in a community of men where that the other men count on you and that they are there for you and they want to listen to you and they're curious about who you are. It's transformative to people's like mental health and purpose and meaning and even direction.
It's huge. It's really huge. Like, because everyone's needed. Anyone like listening to this, like, we're all needed. We're all really useful. Whatever that might be, whether that's walking down the street and saying morning to someone. I challenged myself to walk down the street this morning and say morning to 10 people. Did they all reply? No, they didn't, but that's okay, because I put a smile on 3 people's faces. Like, they needed me. They're like, one of them might be having a really crap morning. I might just turn their day around. Right? We're all needed in these tiny, tiny ways that we just don't realize. We're needed to listen on like, yeah, in a community space. If someone needs someone to listen, to make someone laugh, because we're all in it together. My dad, perfect example. Every Monday now, first thing, he goes for a walk with someone where he lives, another guy. Because then, dad needs him and he needs dad. How powerful is that, right? Doesn't have to be these huge missions or goals, which are great, really great, whether that's work focused or whatever it might be. They are important, but those small interactions can give you a lot of purpose.
Yeah, for sure. Most definitely, man. They're the things that make life worth living. I feel the tiny things. We often think of the big events, like, marriage or having children and stuff like that. But equally, we remember just the small chat we had with the person at the gym or the barista that's always happy and we always chat to. Like, and each of us can be that person. As you said, walking down the street, you could, listeners, you could be that person to somebody. Just that person that smiles and nods, says morning, how are you? And if they reply or not, it's meaningless. Like it's the act that you get from just being more self-expressed that creates the value for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And another story which I think will hopefully inspire people is that I was, last week woke up, was feeling a bit sad, to be honest. Kind of, classic processing a breakup. Anyway, went to meet a mate for coffee. Was cycling on a line bike in Clapham in London. Pulled up at the lights. Been red for ages. Someone behind me on a line bike. She goes, "God, these lights ever going to change?" Pulls up beside me. We just start having a good chat whilst we wait for the lights to change. Lights change and we cycle along. Get to the next light. It's gone red. We start chatting again. Right. Then like, okay, great. She cycles up and does her thing. Such a nice conversation. That conversation completely flipped my day. Really flipped it around. And it was all from this one small action of this like energy that she gave in that moment. She's like, "Yeah, we just don't talk to each other in London, do we?" As I work, but I don't understand why. And I was like, "Yeah, no, I completely agree." And we had this conversation. And it was so simple. So it probably made her feel really good, and it made me feel really good. So it's a win-win. It's a win-win.
Yeah.
So yeah, do the thing, and if someone ignores you, then fine, just laugh about it.
Yeah, it's so important to laugh about it. It doesn't mean anything about you.
No, exactly.
Well, Dan, it's been a really beautiful conversation really to hear your story and your mission and your purpose. And it's really, what's also really beautiful is that your mission like comes through your content. It's very clear, as someone who works in this space of men and works and is kind of attuned to looking at like what's someone about, what are they trying to do in the world. It's super clear, and it's just such a beautiful story. It's a difficult story, but also it's just such an impactful story that you tell about yourself, your father, and opening up in the way that you do. I'm sure the listeners are wondering where they can listen to more of you, see some of your content, join the community.
Yeah. So from my content, just on Instagram, it's Dan Shrigley, which is, because people sometimes struggle to spell that, is Shrigley. It is an interesting surname, but I love it. So yeah, Dan Shrigley on Instagram. And then there's also a community page called Shoulders to Shoulder Community. So if you visit the Instagram page, there's a little link in the bio which has more information about the community and how to join it and things like that. So also definitely check that out.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, listeners. Just to let you listeners know, just to say thank you, actually. Thank you for listening, and to, share this episode with anybody is going to be just going to resonate with this. Maybe they've gone through their struggles and mentally they're struggling to find some joy in their life. And this really details ways you can do that. Or maybe it's a man who's struggling with his own emotions and it's a way to express himself. Or maybe he just feels that he's alone in his experience and realize that he's not. There's other men that feel so much like he does. So share it with anybody, share it with everybody. And with that, I will say thank you to Dan and ciao, ciao.